began to develop in the Indus Valley, in today's Pakistan. From these sites, archaeologists have excavated many objects, but the script of this civilization remains unintelligible to us, if it is a script at all. The composition of the earliest Vedas, the oldest source of Hindu thought, seems to have been roughly a millennium later. Beyond these hymns to the gods, though, we have no physical evidence of this world, and neither from the Indus Valley nor sites in the Vedas can we feel the pulse of any historical individuals. It's only 1,000 or more years after the Vedas were composed, with the arrival of the Buddha, that real personalities appear to us on the stage of Indian history. Even before it began to be written down, the story of the Buddha was given permanence in painting and sculpture. In the oldest of the caves at Ajanta, in western India, are probably the earliest surviving representations of the Buddha's life. Vivid frescoes, some of which date back to the 1st century BCE. There, in front of you, are the oldest Indian faces in existence. The writer and historian William Dalrymple says, "They inhabited a world incredibly different from ours. Yet you can look into the eyes of these people, of individuals, and their emotions are immediately recognizable." Although scholars still debate the Buddha's exact dates, with an elastic range for his death that stretches from roughly 500 to 400 BCE, it's clear he lived in an era of remarkable invention worldwide. Within the space of a couple of centuries, Confucius articulated his social philosophy in China, written versions of the Old Testament crystallized in Palestine, and Socrates conducted the dialogues that would lay many of the foundations of Western philosophy. On the Gangetic plains of northern India, iron tools, writing, and coinage were producing and circulating new wealth. Trade contacts with Persia and Western Asia were creating cosmopolitan cities, bustling with commerce and competing ideas about how to live a good life. Many of the forms of Hinduism familiar to Indians today, as well as many conflicting world views, also took shape in this period. The Buddha's life played out in the midst of this flux. He grew up within sight of the high mountains of Nepal, on the northern edges of the Maghad region. Social life was largely regulated by the rituals contained in the Vedas. These practices, and the sacred verses describing them, were in turn fiercely controlled by the priestly castes that constituted the highest varna or estate of men, the Brahmins. But across Maghad, communities were beginning to reject both Brahminic power and Vedic rituals, such as animal sacrifice. Some of these communities were chiefdoms dominated by men from the warrior and trading varnas. The Buddha himself was a member of the second highest varna, the Kshatriyas, made up of warrior castes. He was a product of his own time, the Harvard scholar Charles Hallisey says, but he was also an innovator, someone who creates something new in the world, and this tension is right at the center of everything we think about who the Buddha was historically. There are almost as many versions of how the Buddha developed his radical moral vision as there are Buddhist traditions around the world today. Perhaps the most well-known, depicted on the walls of the Ajanta caves, is an inward drama, the story of one man's religious, psychological, and ethical experimentation. After a cosseted upbringing, Siddhartha Gautam was deeply shaken by his first encounters with human suffering. Let's set aside how sheltered he must have been to have grown up not encountering suffering. Undone by his belated exposure to worldly pain, he resolved to escape it. Renouncing his wealthy family, he took up the life of a wandering ascetic. "My body became extremely lean," he later said. "When I thought I would touch the skin of my stomach, I actually took hold of my spine." Over the course of 6 years, Siddhartha explored a number of his spiritual practices and philosophies swirling around northern India, but his attempts to find a release from suffering proved fruitless. Then, after abandoning these efforts, he was jolted, Proust-like, by a childhood memory of how, as his father worked nearby, Siddhartha sat under the shade of a rose-apple tree in a state of pure joy, without sensual desires, without evil ideas. How could he recover that state? Days passed in mental struggle, and then, one spring night, while sitting under a bodhi tree, he achieved it. And in that state, he believed he had grasped the causes of suffering,